And welcome back to the Steve Malzberg Show. Busy hour. Joining us now to talk about a very interesting study regarding temperatures. Not yours, the temperature outside for the most part, is our friend Marc Morano. He is the founder of ClimateDepot.com. Hey, Marc.
Hey, Steve. Thanks for having me on. Yeah,
it's always my pleasure.
Yet another. Yeah, thanks.
Another little nugget for Al Gore to figuratively choke on when it comes to his global warming spiel and all the rest of them, including, by the way, Chris Christie. But let's talk about this. We know that there's been a 17-year pause in the so-called warming of the Earth. The temperatures have not gone up globally in 17 years, but that's not enough to stop the people, the aforementioned Gore or Obama or Christie for that matter. Now comes a study that this pause is likely to last for another 20 years.
Yeah, now, first of all, this is published in the journal Climate Dynamics. And one of the most interesting things, aside from the hard science of this, is that the chief author of this is a Professor Judith Curry of the Georgia Institute of Technology. Judith Curry, just 5 years ago, was a huge believer in the United Nations IPCC, was a huge global warming alarmist. This is yet another victory for global warming skeptical scientists. She has essentially flipped sides now, and she is now challenging the orthodoxy. In fact, there was an article called Judith Curry, the High Priestess of Global Warming No More. She's a climatologist, atmospheric scientist, and she is now one of the leading, you can call her a skeptic. She doesn't like that phrase because it scares people away. Even skeptics don't like the phrase now because they don't want to be labeled. But she is challenging it, and this study is set to rock the climate debate because not only have it been 17 years, and Steve, what this means is every high school kid graduating has never experienced global warming in their lifetime. And according to Judith Curry, by the way, every elementary school kid from 2002 forward has experienced a slight global cooling. So here we have kids today, not only do they not know what global warming is, all they've experienced now in elementary school kids is global cooling. It's shocking, and it's set to go another 20 years. That means people are going to be reaching the age of...
They'll be married, and they'll be married, and
40 years old.
Right, they'll be married, and their kids will be in preschool. There'll still be no rise in temperatures, and they'll still be getting taught, and some of them, most of them, talking, unfortunately, about how the Earth is warming. Interestingly enough, without getting too in-depth scientifically speaking, this study shows that the UN, the IPCC, for instance, have underestimated the role of something you and others have been talking about forever, and that's natural cycles in the weather, cycles in the Earth, in the atmosphere, and they've over-exaggerated the threat of so-called greenhouse gases.
Yes, and here's what they've done. And you can go back to the old ClimateGate emails. They actually openly talk about excluding and being frustrated with solar science because they wanted to talk about the sun's influence. They're frustrated with oceanographers because they want to talk about ocean cycles. They're frustrated with volcanologists and geologists because they want to talk about land use and volcanoes' influence. There are quite literally hundreds of factors, and what the UN IPCC has done, and what Judith Curry is touching on in this one study, published in a peer-reviewed journal, by the way, what they're touching on is that natural forces are dominating the climate, not man-made gases. In other words, humans may have an influence, but it may be something that you can't even detect. And yes, there is such a thing as man-made global warming, but you can't distinguish it from natural climate variability. There's quite literally hundreds of factors influencing the climate. I actually am critical of some skeptical scientists because the ones that study the sun, the ones that study the oceans, they will claim that their area is the most dominant one that controls the natural forces. And if you actually take a step back and look at it, the skeptics are collectively correct, but the ones that study all these different fields, whether it be tilt of the Earth's axis, the solar system, clouds, water vapor, methane, and all these natural cycles, it's a fascinating thing to watch because collectively they show you that it's the hundreds of factors. It leaves no room for man-made CO2 to be not only an insignificant factor, but there's no way it could possibly be the tail that wags the dog. And this latest study is showing it, and the fact that there's been studies now, all these climate models. I think it was 117 climate models, 114 utterly failed. And what's amazing about that is the stopped clock is usually right twice a day. I say usually because the climate modelers can't even hit that You're talking, only 3 out of 117 models are correct. So this is an embarrassment. This continues, though, across the board. And even the UN was forced to do some backtracking.
Yeah, I was going to mention, and we're talking to Marc Morano here on the Steve Molesberg Show, the founder of ClimateDepot.com. And, the report of the IPCC report, the co-authors like Dr. Hawkins admit that some of their models are too hot. He said, quote, the upper end of the latest climate model projections is inconsistent with observed temperatures, though he added even the lower predictions could have negative impacts if true. But to get them to admit even that, now, what we have here is proof positive that this whole thing is a scam, in my opinion, and I'm sure in your opinion. Yet, last Friday, 5 days ago, Barack Obama signs an executive order saying that going forward, all projects related to business or energy that go forward in the United States, local, state, and federal levels have to allow for and take into account the after effects or the effects of global warming. That's going to raise the price of every project. It's going to prevent projects. It's going to prevent us from progressing to energy independence. It's a tax on all of us, and he did that through executive order. And you got Chris Christie, the big moderate savior, the Republican savior supposedly, who has said time and time again he believes that global warming is real and he believes that it's man-made. So, I mean, even though the evidence is not there, and the evidence, in fact, is the opposite, nonetheless, we got a president who rules by dictate, and we got a guy in the on-deck circle willing to pick up that mantle and run with it.
Yeah, by the way, I've had personal dealings with Christie's people. Christie was a global warming skeptic back in, I guess it was 2010.
Yeah, well, it's not politically expedient to get Democrats to vote for you if you're a skeptic.
Yes, I was told by one of his top advisors that because he withdrew from this greenhouse gas initiative of the northeastern states, he needed to toss the environmentalists a bone, and he basically reversed himself on global warming. He got a bunch of alarmist scientists from Rutgers University. He refused them with people like Princeton's Will Happer, with Freeman Dyson, some of the most eminent scientists in New Jersey. And he refused to meet with them because they were skeptical. Instead, he made a political calculation to believe in this. And again, it's so the media loves them. It's so he's friendly with the environmentalists. And the same Chris Christie's people will tell you, well, people like Ken Cuccinelli need to learn to compromise, and you can't agree with someone 100%. But Christie himself refuses to campaign for people that he doesn't agree with 100%. In other words, anyone who's got principles he won't agree with,
which is why he wouldn't go to Virginia, right?
Yeah, and I'd be very concerned. The same way that Mitt Romney, John McCain was shoved down the Republicans' throats by the establishment, but shoved down our throats, I think Christie is almost a shoo-in. And if you look at some of the analysis, Dick Morris once said every Republican establishment favorite has been nominated since the 1940s, maybe barring Ronald Reagan as the exception. Chris Christie is a serious, especially when it comes to global warming, problem. This is a man who looks to come in and be politically expedient, and the problem with that is he's going to buy, fund, accept, rubber stamp UN treaties, but the UN science, and he's going to buy into all of this science and continue the funding of all these organizations that are now overrun with former Gore staffers, like the American Meteorological Society. It's really sad. I don't know how you prevent it because the GOP establishment is out to crush global warming. Anyone who's any Tea Party / members, and then that's usually the global warming skeptics.
Right. No, I couldn't agree with you more. Now, let me ask you, Mark, you're going to Poland to a UN conference in about a week or so. What's taking place there?
Well, first of all, I used to be at the United States Senate Environmental Public Works Committee, and I go every year to these UN conferences. I had $16,000 round-trip tickets paid for by the U.S. taxpayer to such locations as Kenya, Africa, Nairobi, to Bali, Indonesia, to South America, to Rio, to Argentina. They were Bali, Indonesia, to South America, to Rio, to Argentina. They were from dime now, but I'm a little bit bummed that they've chosen in late November to go to Poland, Warsaw, Poland. The UN knows how to throw a party. It's one thing they're very good at, very efficient at. There have been previous UN conferences where they fly in chefs from around the world, caviar, champagne, where they discuss global poverty and in places like Africa. But this year, they're trying to get a new Kyoto protocol on global warming meeting. But this year is going to be a prep one, and they're trying to get Obama. Don't be surprised that a lame duck Obama, looking for his legacy, may give this UN global warming process a lot more oomph. You've already mentioned the executive order, which, by the way, goes in line with what Obama's trying to do. He no longer wants Congress. He no longer wants a big public debate. He's going behind the scenes in the EPA to regulate global warming, and this executive order is going to have very far-reaching implications. You can build a beach house. Sorry, if the models show rising seas will have the house water in 30 years, you're not going to be able to build it. You want to develop land. You want to build roadways. You want to build buildings. Every implication now of our government is going to be
absolutely, and
global warming predictions.
And of course, the Supreme Court is going to hear whether or not the EPA, if the EPA overstepped its bounds, if the Clean Air Act, I believe, gives.
Don't count on the EPA. Don't count on the court. They originally gave.
I know they gave. I know that. I know that. I'm not. Believe me. I'm watching Obamacare, and I'm not. I was counting on the court to prevent that, but that didn't happen either. Mark, always a pleasure to speak to you, sir. Thank you very much. All right, but just as his cell phone just about 99% died, he was trying to say goodbye desperately. I did hear him make an effort. Anyway, that's Marc Morano. Check out climatedepot.com, or as Barack Obama might call it, climatedepot.com. That has that's not a marijuana reference. That's because he called the Marine Corps or the Corps the corpsman. So, what could I say? Well, what could I say? But this is so. It's really, to be honest with you, it's people like Chris Christie that are the problem. Now, I've been spending most of the show picking on Chris Christie. I'm sorry. Chris Christie is a phony. Chris Christie is a phony. And to me, the biggest issue, one of the biggest issues, I mean, I wrote column after column a couple years ago about Chris Christie. Should he run for president? I said only if we must, only if we have to have him as the Republican nominee. But he's done things even since then. And, and changing his story, changing his position on in-state tuition for the kids of illegals, and then denying he ever held the other position, that he was ever against it, and claiming that he was only against implementing it because we didn't have the funds. And now that we have the funds, he's for it. Well, why don't you take those funds and give the most taxed state in the nation some tax relief? Nope. He'd rather give it to the children of illegals. So the children of illegals can go to New Jersey colleges at a discount, while if a kid from New York, 2 miles away across the border or whatever, wants to go to that same college in New Jersey, he'll pay full price. But the kid of an illegal in New Jersey will pay the discounted price. He's a phony. But my point is, buying into global warming based on what? Based on what? Saying it's man-made based on what? It just has not warmed in the last 16, 17 years, and now the projections from a former global warming, enthusiast, one of the foremost, now says there probably won't be any rise in temperatures for the next 17 to 20 years or so. We're coming back, folks. Steve Malzberg Show, Newsmax TV and radio, former Virginia Governor Gilmore.